All right, good day, folks, and welcome back. I hope you are ready to take oodles and poodles of notes um, as we rejoin the story of the founding of Rome. Um, in truth, I would highly recommend that you approach this video with the idea of uh, pausing it when you need to take down information, whether it's written on the slides or whether it's information that I share with you through the miracle that is my voice. Um, I'm not going to go back and tell us how we got to this point in the story of the founding of Rome. Um, I'm trusting that the work that you did last week with me on Thursday um, is still available to you. Your notes, some recordings, and so on were posted. But a quick reminder that we have reached the point in the story where Amulius, shown here, overthrows Numitor, Numitor being the legitimate ruler of Alba Longa as the elder brother and here representing the Silvian dynasty, being overthrown by Amulius, and Amulius taking drastic, harmful measures to make sure that Numitor does not have any male descendants who can prevail and challenge him, challenge Numitor or Numitor's own descendants for the kingship. Those drastic actions included the crime of killing Numitor's sons and of forcing Rhea Silvia to take the vows and oath that she would preserve her virginity so that she could function as a priestess of Vesta. Now, um, we're going to move forward now. A quick reminder that the actions of Mars, who by his Greek name Ares might be more familiar to you if you're on the Percy Jackson side of the Rick Riordan fence. But Mars slash Ares um, uh, changes, certainly, the role of Rhea Silvia. When he approaches her, and as we talked about months ago, well, seemingly a month ago, um, he violently rapes her. And again, I apologize for the disturbing nature of this material. If you are disturbed by some of the violent acts that are going to be discussed, I can fully understand that. Um, and I don't want to excuse the violence of the Romans. It's certainly not what we would accept in the modern world today. So Mars' assault on Rhea Silvia, here depicted in this ancient mosaic from North Africa, here a little bit more menacingly in the painting by Peter Paul Rubens. The assault of Mars on Rhea Silvia resulted in the birth of two sons. Um, and I'd like to, before I click forward with their names, which I know that you know, I just want to draw quick attention to this uh, ancient Roman coin. Um, a lot of the art that I am showing to you in the various presentations we've done about the chapter one reading have included art from the period of the Renaissance or after. This is like the mosaic that we saw 2 slides ago, is an actual Roman artifact. It is a sign of how very well known and how frequently retold was the story of Rome's founding. On the left side of the coin, what we would call the heads side of the coin, um, the Roman term for that is the capita, the heads side of the coin, we would find the head of Mars, helmeted as he is a warrior, It's also going to be a little bit difficult to see, but we have the beginning of his name here, M, and then an A, and then what might be an R. Um, but this coin has been very badly damaged, as well as being maybe not struck on center. On the tail side of the coin, we would call this the tail side. The Romans called this the naves side. Um, we are going to see the name Roma, Rome. We also see another name. This is actually the name of the man who made the coin. His name would have been Sextus something. His name is partially obscured. But let's leave the letters aside and notice the presence of twin boys and the she wolf. And then we're also going to find a couple of other important artifacts or elements in the story of Romulus and Remus represented here. Um, One element is going to be the fig tree. Trust me, this is a fig tree. The second element here is a woodpecker. I know it's really difficult to identify, but this traditional element in the story is a woodpecker. And then over here we have a shepherd. We'll be talking about him in more detail coming forward, but we have human legs and a human arm, damaged human head, and in the background a hut, a building that looks like the hut where the shepherd lives. And all of these elements of the story are going to come together as we move forward. What can I say except Romulus and Remus are the names of the twin boys, born out of Mars' assault upon Rhea Silvia. And you'll recall from the reading that Amulius had no interest in allowing Romulus and Remus to grow up. Sure, they'd been born, but he wanted them to die. And Amulius had ordered some of his servants, in particular a shepherd there in Alba Longa who was visiting the palace, to take the boys and put them in a basket and drown them by taking them to a river, the river that flows right through Alba Longa, and putting the floating basket into the river with the understanding that the river would eventually capsize the basket and the boys would drown. The murder of innocent babies that this represents is truly horrific. Um, One of the things we could discuss is how Amulius wanted to avoid blame for their death. In many ancient myths and legends, if nature, in the form of river water or hungry animals, if nature kills babies that humans have put out in nature with the purpose of having them die, there's less of a crime. This is an ancient mindset that you'll often find in literature, especially Greek and Roman literature, that to us, the crime doesn't seem any less horrific. But I'm just trying to explain that Amulius, with some degree of conscience, um, did not kill the babies outright, but rather had set them to afloat, or ordered them set afloat in a river that eventually flowed into the Tiber River. Tiberus in Latin, Tiber in English, is the river along which Rome is situated. The city of Rome was built next to the Tiber River. We'll see that on an upcoming map. And in the story, in this myth and legend of Romulus and Remus, the god of the Tiber River deliberately chose to save the two boys out of a sense not only of kindness towards them, but also out of a sense of knowing, because he is a god, that he, the Tiber River, will become glorious, famed, renowned, spoken of throughout the world because of the city of Rome, which is built on the banks of the Tiber. And so, in this myth and legend, um, the god of the Tiber River chooses deliberately to save the two boys, calming the floodwaters of the river in which the babies are floating, and setting them safely ashore on the muddy banks of the Tiber River. You're going to see on this slide one other name that becomes very, very important. You'll see this name again. And I want to tell you that, this is complicated, before Rome existed, approximately 400 years before Rome existed, way back in the time of Aeneas, the site of what would become Rome was occupied by an ancient Greek city, a city that was known as Pallanteum. And Aeneas had actually visited Pallanteum. He had come to the site where Rome would eventually be built, but of course, Rome wasn't there yet. In fact, shortly after Aeneas's visit, the city of Pallanteum fell into decay and ruins and disappeared. The population of that city moved away or died out, and only the name of Pallanteum existed at the time that Romulus and Remus came ashore there. All right, let me see if I can get this slide to advance. Very quickly, I know this map is TMI, but I did want to show you very, very quickly here Alba Longa. And I wanted to show you this river that eventually flows into the Tiberis. You can see the red line here, Tiberis, R for river. So here's the Tiber River, and eventually Rome is going to be built right here. And the Tiber flows down into the sea called the Tuscan Sea over here. But when Amulius ordered a shepherd to put the babes in the water, they were put into a tributary and it floated downstream to eventually join the Tiberis. And boom, when they got here, the god Tiberis set the boys safely onto dry land. But their adventure was not over. Okay? Again, we have a Roman artwork. What I'd like you guys to notice is, yep, you're seeing it. In the background, there is a hill. This hill is going to become very important. I'm going to tell you right now that this hill was the location of the former Greek city of Pallanteum. Pallanteum had been built on the top of that hill. Who's this reclining here? I encourage you to look at the flowing cloth of this god's garment. This is a depiction of an ancient god. Look at the flowing design of the cloth of his garment, both that which goes over his right leg and that which lies under him. Look at the flowing beard. Look at this water jug tipped on its side. Which god is this? Yes, you're right. It's the god Tiberis, the god of the Tiber River. Now, the very, very funny thing is that this sculpture of the Tiber River as a god with Pallanteum's hill in the background was actually an ancient fountain. At the time of its design in Rome, this was actually a working fountain. And guess where the water came out? The connection for the water pipe to Rome's aqueducts was hidden behind the sculpture, but the water actually flowed out of the jug and flowed into this trough. Humans would collect water from its flow out of the jug. Animals could drink out of the trough where the pooled water was collected. And so this ingenious fountain um, has as its figurehead the god of the Tiber River. It's a pretty artistically engineered, if I may put those two words together, a very artistically engineered reminder of Rome's origins. Now, you probably are also wanting to hit me over the head because I haven't pointed out this extra head over here. You may find it difficult to recognize, but that is the head of the she-wolf. So just in case somebody didn't recognize this as the hill where Palantium had been built, and this specifically is the Tiber River god, the she-wolf was an instant reminder that this scene in the fountain was meant to conjure up memories of Rome's founding. You guys know a lot about the lupa from the reading in the textbook. Suffice it to say, I want you to know that the wolf is an animal sacred to Mars. The lupa is an animal sacred to the god of war. And it would very much make sense that Mars would send this pregnant, sorry, I don't want to say pregnant, this nursing, lactating wolf to safeguard and to feed Romulus and Remus. As menacing as a wolf to us would seem to be, when Mars sends the she wolf, there is no menace, there's only nurturing. I'll also give you guys a little bit more information about Palantium in writing. Um, Palantium, remember, belongs to the time period approximately 400 years before Rome existed. And it was an ancient Greek settlement that was ruled by a father and son. Evander was the aged king, very old man king in Palantium. His son Pallas was much younger, not quite ready to be king, but Pallas eventually went to war to fight alongside Aeneas and the Trojans. You folks who are mythologically attuned might note that this is something of a paradox because the Greeks had attacked the Trojans during the Trojan War, but here in Italy, the Greek king Evander and his son Pallas were actually allies of the Trojans and Aeneas. And that's part of the, how do I want to say this, the change in the fate of the Trojans, that they find at long last that the Greeks will fight on their side in a just cause. Now, those of you who are, again, mythology hounds will probably know that Pallas, the name of Evander's son, is also the name, one of the names used by the goddess Athena slash Minerva. Athena slash Minerva, the goddess of craft, of warcraft, of creativity and cleverness. She was the special protector of Pallas. And in fact, Evander had named his son Pallas to honor the goddess Pallas Athena, aka Minerva. And he had also named his city Palantium. Palantium literally means the city of Pallas, in honor of Athena slash Minerva, because it was Athena slash Minerva who had guided Evander to settle on this hill. I apologize for all the layers of mythology I'm throwing at you. If you find this challenging, just stick to the details that are on the slide. But there's one more detail on the slide. I need you guys to know that even though the city of Palantium died out, the name did not die. It was transformed into the name Palatine. This Latin name, Palantium is Greek, Palatine is Latin, echoes the Greek city Palantium. And the Palatine was the first hill incorporated into Rome's walls. Rome was built on a hill that was called by the Latins and the Romans the Palatine Hill. That's where Romulus built his city, on the top of the Palatine Hill. But the name attached to that hill, Palatine, came from the ancient Greek settlement of Palantium that was built atop this hill. So to a Roman, they would not say this is the hill on which Palantium was built. They would just call this the Palatine Hill. Okay? All right, very cool. And Rome eventually grew its walls and incorporated a total of 7 hills, as we will see in an upcoming slide. Now, bear with me. I want to go back to this image, which we first saw in the textbook on page 1. And I'd like to unpack some of the details in this image for you. Everybody recognized the twins and the she-wolf, yay. But I know there were lots of questions about the dude in the background. Some of you might have questions about these birds. And I know that there were questions about these 2 figures here on the left. I will tell you that those 2 figures are divine. They are not human. Here's a human. Here are 2 divine beings. She-wolf, Romulus, or is this one Remus? Remus, or is this one Romulus? How do we tell the twins apart? Short answer is we can't. Now, what I'd like to do is kind of deconstruct some of the images, some of the detailed portions of the images. We're good with the she-wolf, no problem. Okay, we've got Snacky Boy here. Don't know whether to call him Romulus or Remus. Snacky Boy. And what's this boy doing? Okay. He is reaching up his hands, and they're almost in a gesture that the Romans would associate with praying. We might associate this gesture with amazement or enjoyment, but the Romans associated it with praying. And yet, some of you are going to say, this boy is too young to be praying. If he is or isn't, then the second question would come up. What is he praying to? What's this gesture all about? And here we have the bird. The bird is the word. This is a woodpecker. Remember the fig tree that had the woodpecker in it? Here in our illustration, we got woodpecker 1, woodpecker 2, woodpecker 3. Possibly we're seeing multiple moments in time. It is really hard to tell. But notice these 2 woodpeckers are in a fig tree. Very quickly, the woodpecker is another animal sacred to Mars, the god of war. Some of you might express surprise. A woodpecker is not an aggressive, carnivorous bird like an owl or a hawk or an eagle. So some of you might be reluctant to connect it with war. But think about the bill of a woodpecker. It's sharp and pointed like a spear tip. The woodpecker pounds that bill or beak or spear tip into wood to retrieve insects. It's an aggressive bird with a lot of pounding with a sharp implement. So it's very much natural for the woodpecker to be a symbol of Mars. Is it possible that this child, not Snacky Boy, but Happy Boy, Happy Boy is recognizing the symbol of his father, Mars? And I don't want to become crude or upsetting to you, but the birds in the trees maybe capture another moment in time This looks to me, I have seen birds mate in nature. This looks to me like birds mating. And so perhaps symbolically, woodpecker number one and woodpecker number two are Mars and Rhea Silvia here in the tree. So we have a moment in time that goes back to the conception of Romulus and Remus. And here in the center of the picture, we have a moment in time where Mars the woodpecker, in the person of the woodpecker, or sends the woodpecker to give Happy Boy his blessing. Okay? So we have Happy Boy and we have Snacky Boy. It's still hard to tell which is which. But if I'm reading this, I see this as Romulus, recognizing his father is saying, "You're going to be number one." And I see Snacky Boy distracted by food. But who knows? Last thing I want to pull out of this painting, at this image in the painting, I want you to count with me the seashells. Now, don't count the crab. The crab is alive, it's living, but count the shells for me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What does the number 7 have to do with this story? Remember on the last slide, there's mention of the fact that Rome eventually grew to encompass 7 hills and became famous as a city of 7 hills. So it's almost as if this painting is also looking into the future. Rome would eventually, long after Romulus, be a city of 7 hills. Pushback. Okay. You see the big picture again. What else do you notice? Okay. Got our fig tree, the 2 woodpeckers here, the 1 woodpecker here, Happy Boy and Snacky Boy, she wolf, 7 seashells representing the future 7 hills of Rome. And what is this? Fishy? Fishy? Crabby? Sorry, I'm not calling you crabby, although you probably are because this is a really long recording. We have water. And where is the water coming from? The water is coming from a jug, a pitcher, a vase. Who is leaning on the vase? Someone with a long flowing beard. This is the painter Rubens depicting the god of the Tiber River. He's here depicted as an old man with flowing beard and long flowing hair, leaning on the water jug, the source of the water for the Tiber River. And the god of the Tiber River is watching this scene with an eye to the future, what these 2 boys are going to build. In the city of Rome that is going to come to be the head of the world. Who is the feminine character in the background? It is not Rhea Silvia. Okay? Take my word for it. The jewels, the peaceful, beautiful expression, they are representations that this character is divine. Which goddess perhaps has the greatest investment in the future of Rome? Which goddess has the longest investment in Rome and its history? If you're thinking Venus / Aphrodite, ding, 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 you are a winner. Rubens has shown here the goddess Venus / Aphrodite, the goddess of love, who in mythology and legend is the mother of Aeneas. Aeneas the Trojan, who had come to Italy. And she, in the background, both literally in the picture and in the background of the myth, is looking forward in time to the moment when Romulus and Remus will build the city of Rome. If you notice, though, where are her eyes? I know they're on her face, but while the god of the Tiber is looking very clearly down at Happy Boy and Snacky Boy, where are Venus's eyes? They're here. They're on the moment when the woodpeckers representing Mars and Rhea Silvia are mating. When Mars, driven by lust, impregnates Rhea Silvia. Okay? So there's an aspect, again, of this story, to be clear, it's disturbing. We would not necessarily want to associate what Mars did with actual love, but rather with lust and to some degree cruelty as well. And Venus / Aphrodite can be a goddess who is cruel. All right, we're good. Again, the flowing waters of the river, the 7 hills of Rome. We've had it, haven't we, with this painting? Yep, except for the character in the background. Who is he? I will tell you, he is a human. Okay? The full array of clothing is one good indicator. The somewhat haggard, worried expression on his face is another good indicator that he is a human. I'd like you guys to notice he is wearing an animal pelt to keep warm. And he is also holding a staff with a crook at the end, a bent curve at the end. And he is, in fact, a shepherd. And his role in the story of Romulus and Remus was totally left out of the chapter reading. So this is new information for many of you. And I know it's a lot of information all at once, but here's the dealy bob. After the she-wolf nursed and fed and nurtured and kept warm Romulus and Remus, a shepherd named Faustulus, who was passing by the Palatine Hill, in fact, his hut was on the Palatine Hill, and he was going back to the hill from his duties as a shepherd, saw up against the slope of the Palatine Hill a she-wolf at the entrance of her cave, her den, feeding Romulus and Remus. And he was struck by what a disturbing scene it was. The idea of 2 humans in the close proximity to a wolf, but the wolf was being kind and nurturing. Faustulus, we are told, before taking any action, went home and told his wife Laurentia is the wife of Faustulus, what he had seen. And Laurentia, who had great sensibility, said, Faustulus, how could you leave the boys there? They're safe now, but they need human care and human companionship. Go and fetch the boys. Faustulus obediently did so and brought them home. And together, Faustulus and Laurentia raised the boys to adulthood. When they did so, they hid away the basket and the clothing and the other articles that had been with Romulus and Remus and had washed up next to the shores of the Tiber. Now, I need you to picture this. Those items are still on the shores of the Tiber when the she-wolf brings the boys to her den to care for them. Faustulus finds them and sees them, says, what are these doing here? Then he finds the boys and the she-wolf up against the slope of the Palatine near the wolf's den. And then he goes home and tells his wife what's going on. And she sent him back to get not only the babies, but also their blankets, their wrappings, the basket, and whatever other objects they had been sent down the river with. But Faustulus and Laurentia hid them away. They knew it was dangerous. They had put two and two together that these boys were Romulus and Remus, the grandsons of Amulius, and that if Amulius knew they were still alive, their lives would be in jeopardy again. They might be killed. So Romulus and Remus grew up not knowing who they were until the point where they reached manhood. Up until that time, they were raised as orphans taken care of by Faustulus and Laurentia, essentially adopted. They grew up as hardworking shepherds, and they had a special devotion. I know this is going to seem totally off topic, but they had a special devotion to the Latin god or Roman god Pales. Pales is a Latin god who looks after shepherds and keeps shepherds and flocks of sheep safe. And Romulus and Remus grew up with a special devotion to Pales because they were working as shepherds. They knew that Pales was their protector. Now, long story. I'm going to pick up the pace. Romulus and Remus grow up. When they reach adulthood, when they've proven themselves capable of defending themselves as part of their shepherd duties, they had to fight off large and predatory animals. They had to fight off bandits who would try to steal the sheep. At the point when Romulus and Remus were fully capable of defending themselves, Faustulus and Laurentia told them who they were and brought out the basket and baby clothes that they had been sent in down the river. And it was clear that these baby clothes, even though they were now many years old, were fine fabric. They were the cloth of royalty and of city dwellers, not the cloth of shepherds who live in the country and sometimes resort to wearing animal skins. With this proof of who they were and being told by Faustulus and Laurentia who they were and that their grandfather was still confined in prison, that their great uncle Amulius had unjustly killed their mother's brothers, and that Rhea Silvia had been um, forced into a priesthood that, and when she broke her vows, she had been imprisoned as well. Long and short of it, they were enraged, and they returned to Alba Longa from the site of their father's hut near the Palatine Hill. And there are a couple versions of this story. They either led a popular uprising against Amulius, and in that popular uprising, Amulius was accidentally killed defending himself. In other versions, Romulus and Remus sought him out and killed him. But in either version, Amulius is kicked off the throne, and Numitor is freed from prison, and Romulus and Remus place Numitor on the throne, replace him, put him back on the throne as king of Alba Longa. Now, if this were a simple story, Romulus and Remus would become princes in Alba Longa and live happily ever after. But it's a complicated story because Romulus and Remus have in them their father's DNA, their father's character, Mars, a god of struggle and conflict. And they don't want to be king in a peaceful, established city. They have the spirit of pioneers and conquerors, and they lead a colony back to the site of ancient Palantium. We're going to talk more about that in just a moment, but I wanted to show you a slightly different illustration of the story of Romulus and Remus. I'm going to try to make this super quick, um, even though it might seem painful to you and long. But look at the long white ridge Alba Longa in the background. I want you to also look at this shepherd who, while probably caring for the flock of King Amulius, has been tasked with putting the babies to float in the river. Now, step back very, very far in time and look over here. Here is Rhea Silvia, who also bears the name Ilia. That's the name, if you can read the fine print that's here. Rhea Silvia / Ilia and Mars. This is the moment at which Mars assaults Ilia / Rhea Silvia and impregnates her. In the background, this round temple is very clearly to me the temple of Vesta that Ilia / Rhea Silvia was a priestess in. Okay, so we have background to the story of Romulus and Remus all up here in the background and on the left-hand side. We've got the Tiber River. We've got the babies in the basket. Faustulus, okay, in version 1 here, because there are actually 2 Faustulus characters in this painting. It's showing 2 moments at once. He draws the baby from the water. Here, he brings the babies to his wife in their hut. And you're going to notice what is missing from this scene. Entirely gone from this scene is the she-wolf, the lupa. And it's a fascinating, to me, piece of art history. The history of art, not the history of Rome. In the Middle Ages, when this manuscript was painted with this scene to illustrate the story of Romulus and Remus, the wolf universally was seen as a sign of evil, of greed, and of violence. The wolf was a symbol of greedy violence in the culture, not of the Romans, but in the culture of the Middle Ages that gave us stories like the big bad wolf and the 3 little pigs. There's never a good wolf in a fairy tale, it seems. But in this painting, the artist has chosen to drop the critical role of the lupa from the story. And so we get this altered version of things, which is my way of saying over the course of centuries, stories are subject to change because of the beliefs of the people who tell those stories. Now, this is running really long, and I apologize for that. Here are eventually the 7 hills of Rome. We don't need to name them all, but there are 2 that I want to spotlight, the Palatine Hill and the Aventine Hill, because they play a key role in what happens next. I want to remind you, Romulus and Remus have placed Numitor back on the throne of Alba Longa. They have asked their grandfather, will you give us your blessing to go and build a new city at the place where we grew up, by the shores of the Tiber River? We would like to take shepherds, poor people of Alba Longa, those who don't have any land for themselves in Alba Longa or the surrounding territory, and we would like to take those landless people and establish Rome as a sort of colony of Alba Longa. They didn't call it a colony, but we might call it so, since most of the people who followed Romulus and Remus there were Latin citizens from Alba Longa. Some of them were Sabines. They were a mixture of ethnic groups and populations that followed Romulus and Remus back to woohoo, the site of ancient Pallanteum. And it was there that Romulus and Remus fell into dispute. We have again multiple versions of what happens next. And I'm going to need you guys to listen very well. Pause the video if you need to stop and take notes. But when Romulus and Remus and their followers came to the site of ancient Pallanteum, the two brothers fell into dispute. In some versions, it was over who would be the king, since these two twin brothers seemed to be equal, and nobody could remember which was the older one born first. Okay, that didn't really matter. The other dispute was, as it's told to us, was about the name of the city. Not only which one would be king, but what would the city be named? After which of them? Would it be Roma, named after Romulus? Or would it be Remora, named after Remus? Suffice it to say that the two brothers fell into dispute over either kingship or the name of the city or both. And I want you guys to stop for a moment. Why would the two brothers come to fight about this? Yeah, they both have an eye on glory. That's kind of true. Well, it's very true. But remember, who is their father? Who is their father? It is Mars, the god of war and conflict. And in this instance, the drive for war and conflict turns inward, not against foreign enemies, but future Roman against future Roman, brother against brother. As it happens, the way that the two brothers decide to resolve the dispute over who would be king and what the city would be named was to actually ask their father, Mars, god of war, for a sign. The Romans were a very superstitious people. I can use that word. Slightly judgmental, but I can use it. They looked to signs in nature, signs such as the flight of birds, the direction of dust devils, those clouds of dust that get swirling around each other on dry summer days. They look to the behavior of the clouds and of lightning. And so they look to weather and animal activity as giving signs as to what the gods wanted. We might call this superstition. I just did. But the Romans believed that events in nature were signs of what the gods were ordering the future to be. They were signs of the future that the gods wanted to have happen. We are told that the followers of Romulus and the followers of Remus agreed to disagree and throw the decision to Mars, god of war. To properly observe the signs in nature, one needs to be on a hill, up high, where you can see what's going on around you. And in this myth, Romulus and his followers staked out a spot on the Palatine Hill. Remus and his followers staked out a spot on the Aventine Hill. Both of them very close to the Tiber River, both of them familiar to these two brothers who had grown up in this very small area. We're told that then both brothers prayed to their father Mars for a sign. And Mars sent a sign. Actually, he sent two signs. In both instances, the signs were vultures. Now, I hope you guys can see we've had the lupa as an animal sacred to Mars. We've had the woodpecker as an animal sacred to Mars. You won't be surprised to know that vultures, which feed on the flesh of dead people, including dead warriors, vultures are also sacred to Mars. And here we are told Mars sent vultures to send a signal to Romulus and Remus. Except Mars sent two signals. He sent 6 vultures flying to the right of the Aventine Hill, which Remus saw and said, 6! I see 6 vultures on the right. The right is the favorable side. Mars, my father, wants me to be king. And he rushed to send a messenger to Romulus on the Palatine Hill. The distance between these hills is less than a quarter mile. The messenger set off running, and as he arrived, Romulus, who was still looking to the sky, saw a sign on his right coming from this direction, 12 vultures flying to the right of Romulus, and Romulus shouted out, "My father Mars has sent me a sign, 12 vultures. He wants me to be king." Now, Remus's messenger arrived and said, "But, 3 minutes ago, Remus saw 6 vultures first. He saw the vultures first. It's a sign that Mars wants him to be king." Romulus said, "No, clearly sending me twice as many vultures, 12, is a sign that Mars, my father, wants me to be king. If he wanted Remus to, he changed his mind and sent me 12 vultures, twice as many. Twice as many is better than first." They came to disagreement. There are some versions of the story where violence broke out right then and there. That's not the version I'm going to tell you. What we're going to do is take it to the point where, in Livy's version of the story, Romulus and Remus agreed once again to disagree. They decided they would each build their own city. Romulus on the Palatine Hill, Remus on the Aventine Hill. They ceased to call on Mars for signs, but instead began building. And we are told, and this is the version of the story that we're going to follow as if it were the truth, that the next day, after looking for the signs in the sky, Romulus decided that it was time for him and his men to start building walls, defensive walls, on the top edges of the Palatine Hill. It was already a steep hill, but walls would further prevent any attack, which Romulus worried about coming from Remus and also from neighboring peoples who lived here, there, and everywhere. And we're told that on the morning of April 21st, in a year that we're going to call 753 BC, that Romulus had gotten up early, taken his shovel, and had begun digging the foundations for a defensive wall on the Palatine, and had begun laying the first course of stones in the trench that he was digging. We're told that Remus came over to the Palatine Hill, walked over from the Aventine to see what his brother was doing. And again, we are told that when he saw his brother building the walls, and that the walls were just at their very beginning stage, a single course of stone in a trench, that Remus, to taunt his brother, jumped over the wall and said, Romulus, these walls are going to keep nobody out. What are you doing, you fool? Angered by his brother's action and his brother's taunt, Romulus grabbed his shovel, which he had been using to dig the trench, and killed Remus, struck him over the head with it, knocking him dead. It's a horrible story, isn't it? Sorry, there are no loose intestines lying around. But braining your brother with a shovel? What kind of world is that where that is okay? I'm asking you guys a serious question. What kind of world is it where that is okay? Answer. It's a world where Mars is your father, where the god of war is the father of you and in some ways the father of your country. And having the dispute over who would be king and whose name would be attached on the city solved by violence is exactly what Mars / Ares, the god of war, wants. He wants the Romans to be a people capable of defending themselves in war, capable of aggression in war, and capable of using warfare to control the world around them. It's no wonder that Mars sent two ambiguous signals to the two brothers. He didn't want to be the solution to their problem. He wanted them to use violence as the solution to their problem. Kind of don't know about having a father like that myself. All right, so guys, girls, and people, just a few more details. I know this is running super long, but every year the Romans celebrated Rome's birthday on April 21st. Rome's founding date, by tradition, is April 21st in the year 753 BC, or, as I more commonly would write it or see it in the textbook, B.C.E. Pardon me for that messy E. That date in the Roman calendar, April 21, happened to be the festival of Pales. Now, we had the name of the Roman god of shepherds, Pales, on a previous slide. Even before Rome was founded, the Latin shepherds who lived there had celebrated a festival of Pales, which was called the Parilia. The R in Parilia replaced the L in the name Pales. That tradition of the Parilia, the Feast of Pales, the Festival of Pales, continued onwards into Roman history. But because it was on that day that Romulus, the former shepherd, built the walls of the city of Rome, that April 21st was considered to be Rome's birthday. Okay, so it was a dual festival for Pales. You can see the name down here more clearly, and for Roma's birthday. By the way, you can begin shopping now. Just so you know, April 21st is a really special day, not only because it is Rome's birthday, because April 21st is also my birthday. I was born on April 21st, and don't you get wisecracking at me. I was not born in 753 BCE. I was born in 1965, but I was born on April 21st. Every day, every year, there's a wonderful festival held in honor of my birthday. It is called the Pierilia, the Festival of Pierre. Just kidding. I made that up. There is no such festival. But it is a strange twist of fate, or maybe the gods decreed it, that I, your Latin teacher, share the same date as Rome for our anniversary of birth. Okay, very quickly, let me explain the illustrations. Super slow, but I want you to envision what you see in this right hand illustration as meant to be a recreation. It's a model of the types of huts that the early shepherds of Rome, Romulus and his followers, built for themselves. This model is a reconstruction of the round types of huts that Romulus and his followers would have built for themselves on top of the Palatine Hill. Now, crazy thing, when I was in Rome 3 trips ago with students in 2010, I was poking around on the Palatine Hill and found an archaeological site. And I want you guys to imagine that I took this picture because I actually did. It was about 15 feet below ground level. I was standing on ground level, and 15 feet below ground level, archaeologists had found an ancient hut. The walls had partially collapsed. These metal poles are new additions holding up an awning to cover and protect what the archaeologists had found. But here is the round central area of the hut. Here's a fireplace in which on which to um, cook food and so on. And so, how do I want to say this? In 2010 CE, I visited the Palatine Hill in Rome and saw a hut that the Romans had preserved for hundreds and hundreds of years. They believed that this was Romulus's hut, the hut that he himself had built to live in once he and his followers had settled on the walls of Rome. So, again, I want to take this back to the idea that what we view as myth and legend, the Romans viewed as their living history, and they could see traces of it all around them. Now, the last piece of artwork that I'm showing you, this is the base of a Roman altar, an altar that the Romans would have used for animal sacrifice as part of their religious worship. Can you see the recognizable old god with the flowing cloth and beard? There's the Tiber River. His hand is on his water jug. Here are 3 shepherds walking on a hill. Here is the old man, bearded Faustulus, and with him, either Romulus and Remus or vice versa, Romulus and Remus. It's hard to tell which. But both of them bear shepherd's crooks. He also has a shepherd crook. He's right near a fig tree. You can see the trunk of a fig tree here. The rest of the leaves and the branches would have been painted on this sculpture. We're seeing this sculpture without any of the paint that the Romans would have applied to it. We see an unusual bird, not a vulture, not a woodpecker, but we see Jupiter's eagle. Jupiter's eagle hasn't had a key role in our story, but remember that above Mars as as god of war is Jupiter as king of the gods. And there are plenty of elements in the story of Romulus and Remus that show that Jupiter wanted Rome to be founded. So this eagle is sort of Jupiter giving his blessing. Last but not least, in addition to all these wonderful animals, a goat, a snake, some kind of fox, mice, lizards, we have the mountain that is the Palatine Hill. We have the rocky features of the Palatinus, the Palatine Hill, and in a den or cave, you can kind of see this is hollowed out, sort of a cavern. we have the she-wolf feeding Romulus and Remus. So we get in this Roman altar used to sacrifice to the gods a sense of how the Romans viewed their city as a city that the gods had blessed and wanted to be created. But I do want to point out it was a city that was blessed, shall we say, but also cursed. And that it had at its core strife and bloodshed. When Mars became the father of Romulus and Remus, in some ways, destiny was saying that it could only end with one of them dead at the hands of the other. Now, I have just this next to last slide to go. Um, about 2000, in about 2012, archaeologists excavating into the side of the Palatine Hill found a location that Roman authors had described to us. Roman authors tell us that in February, starting on the 13th of February and extending to the 15th, the Romans held annual religious celebrations at a site that they called the Lupercal. Lupercal literally means the wolf's den, the den of the wolf. In this case, it was the den of the she-wolf. The Romans, again, taking this story as history, had found a cavernous sort of den in the side of the Palatine Hill. They believed that to be the den where the she-wolf had nurtured Romulus and Remus. And over the course of hundreds of years, they had turned it into a religious shrine. A religious shrine partly to the she-wolf, but really to Mars, the god who had sent the she-wolf to protect Romulus and Remus. In 2014, archaeologists excavated and found themselves looking at a hollow in the side of the Palatine Hill. They sent a robotic, I don't want to call it a drone because it wasn't flying. They sent a tracked robot with a camera in through the tiny opening that they had made. And the robot was instructed by the archaeologist to shine lights and to take a photograph of the inside of the cavern. And what they found inside was this wonderfully detailed artwork. These are mosaics where the pebbles are actually affixed to a domed ceiling. What we're looking up at is a domed ceiling that marked the inner part of the shrine, known as the Lupercal. Okay. So, again, the Romans made this a matter of their religious and cultural belief about themselves. And we know a lot about the Lupercalia from ancient writing, but archaeologists have found it. They're pretty darn sure that that is where it was located, right on the side of the Palatine Hill. Now, last slide is a quotation from the Roman historian Livy. We're going to read a little bit more about Livy later this semester. But Livy was a contemporary of two other great Roman authors, Virgil, Horace, and of Rome's first emperor, Augustus. They all four knew each other, and Livy was a historian whose history is called the Ab Urbe Condita. Literally, that means from the founding of the city. And Livy is our main source, not our only source, for the story of Romulus and Remus. Take a moment and read this long quotation. What Livy is saying in the first sort of paragraph is that In the origins of Rome, in its early history, are the characters, both characters in history and also the character, the ideals, the values that made Rome powerful and allowed it to expand. In his own time period, Livy thought that the Romans had gotten far away from the character that had made Rome powerful and expansive in the first place. And in the second paragraph, he's kind of suggesting that Romans of his time period are enfeebled, that they have a sick mind, to put that in air quotation marks. He says, the study of history is the best medicine for a sick mind. In history, you can find for yourself and your country both examples to follow and warnings to heed. Fine things to take as models, base things rotten through and through to avoid. Now, the crazy thing is, what do you find in the story of Romulus and Remus to follow as an example or as a model, or a thing that you view as rotten through and through to avoid? The thing is, Livy doesn't always tell us exactly what we're supposed to get out of this story, but I'd like you guys to think about it. Okay? It's not to say that we are Romans or that we should aspire to be Romans, but in that story, with its great sense of destiny and eventual power for Rome, but also its great loss and cruelty, is there a moral to the story? I don't have an answer for you. But that's the end of the long winded discussion. I'm going to stop recording. You guys are going to go